Thank you. Thanks, Steve, for that introduction. As Steve mentioned, my name is George DeGuido. I'm Executive Director of Email at MXM. We're a content-focused digital marketing agency. We have a great panel here today, and as Steve mentioned, want this to be highly interactive. The best panels are ones where we can engage and really bring the crowd into it. So I know questions have been kind of light, but we're going to try to strum up some interactivity like our channel. We want to be very interactive up here. So I'm going to start out, allow the panel to introduce themselves, give us a little bit more insight into what they do in their day-to-day, and then we'll start from there.
I'll lead off. Dustin Porter, I'm with SoFi. I lead out the CRM lifecycle teams, which involves the database, the data collection, the marketing insights, using the data science team, as well as then activating through the various channels that are typical to CRM and lifecycle, email being a big part of that, right? So SoFi, it's a brand that's growing tremendously fast. We started just about 5 years ago. We've grown from zero to about a $6 billion company. As you can imagine, there's a lot of great strengths about that. Not being on legacy systems, we're able to do things state-of-the-art a little bit more quickly, which is why we're in more in the fintech space instead of traditional banking. So we started out with student loans. That was the big niche that we did, refinancing. So that was kind of new. Personal loans, mortgages now, as well as we've launched a wealth product, so anything from 401k, IRAs, stuff like that. And our deposit accounts coming out later this year. So we treat our customers, we don't call them customers, they are members. It's all about that customer journey. We offer a lot of free services like career services, like $1,000 through like a Corn Ferry type industry. So a lot of really different type of things that differentiate us from the rest of the banking market.
Great, thanks, Cody.
Hi, I'm Cody. I run mortgage marketing for LegacyTexas Bank. In Plano, we're a community bank. You might call us the exact opposite of fintech. Very traditional. We call them customers still. I started about 4 years ago just in database marketing. I was getting out of sales, and on my way to my interview, I Googled database marketing and then went to a Barnes & Noble to read about it a little bit. So I have this great panel for me.
I don't know how I'm going to follow that. I'm Jimmy Wojtila. I work for Vitamix in Olmsted Falls, Ohio. I am the senior specialist for email on the digital marketing team. So I manage our contact strategy in 8 different markets globally, in addition to a commercial, domestic, and international strategy. It's a beast of a program, but we're getting there. Vitamix is the leading high-performance blender company in the world, and proud of it. So, thank you.
Great.
Thank you.
So we're going to have some great discussion up here, but I want to start out and kind of get those interactive juices flowing and take a poll. And I know Steve mentioned earlier that everything's live and being streamed out into the universe. So if you want to remain anonymous, they like to have everybody introduce themselves as you talk about, Steve mentions failure. Failure is a harsh word, so I'm not going to call it failure. We're just going to call it an issue, or something that went out in a non-optimal format or execution. No one likes the term failure. So if you want to share a non-optimal execution story, the video camera's on us, not on you, so you won't be on video, so we can remain anonymous. But I want to take a poll. How many of us out there have actually hit the send button on a campaign or gave the green light for a campaign to get out to customer or members or whatever you'd like to call them? Raise your hands. Hi. All right, so just about everyone. Okay, next question. How many of you, when you either looked at your email and got that seed message, or maybe got a jabber or an IM or a text from a colleague and said, hey, did you see the email? You opened it and had a oh crap moment. Raise your hand. All right, just about everybody again. We all face them. What makes us marketers is that we learn from them and move forward. So I'm going to open up to the panel and tell us a little bit story about a non-optimal execution moment that you may have experienced. Dustin, let's start with you.
All right, talking about failure is fun, right? The first one, this being part of this hyper growth, we had our email team was decentralized, and so we had to bring it all together, which has been a good situation as of late, except for 2 weeks ago. So it was actually funny when I was first talking about this panel. I was like, what failure am I going to think about? We haven't had one recently, and literally the next day was a major failure. So I was like, thanks, Steve, for that. But anyway, so this was one where a business owner outside of didn't work with the new process. So we went outside of the centralized email marketing team, went directly to an engineering team, which strong engineers, really good API development stuff you expect them to do, right? And so we rely on them heavily. Well, this is one, again, trying to develop the new process, use the new QC process, use all that type of stuff, right? What didn't happen? So it was 2 Fridays ago. One of the big things about us is our loan application process, right? And getting them through that funnel, big part of us. So this was more on the acquisition prospect side versus the customer. But so we were putting in a new drip campaign, trigger campaign based off a loan application status, meaning at this point they were trying to upload their documents. So we're just giving them an incentive, hey, make sure to upload your docs so we can eventually fully approve you and move you on through the funnel and get you to sign. And what happened is when this campaign was first set up, the creative was good, everything was put in place, used the SP, everything was good to go. It was set up like a week ahead, which was great versus the first day we were going to start the trigger. It was active, good to go. Again, our team had no idea about this. So the biggest problem was the target audience. The definition wasn't set up. So this trigger was going to go out to every single person within the database. So around 6 million plus. With people that have never even applied with us, right? And now you're getting this trigger to upload documents. Sounds like a problem. So what ended up happening is literally the workforce management person from the call center, who hopefully anytime he runs by my desk, I know we're in trouble, was literally running over, came over and said, what the heck just went out? And I said, I don't know. We didn't have anything planned. We didn't turn anything on. So luckily we were able to cut it off at 385,000 real quickly after some investigation, which again, when you don't know what campaign you're looking for, is kind of hard to find within an ESP. So we were able to cut it off, and then, anyway, we can talk about damage control after.
Yep. So Cody, why don't you take next?
I don't have anything quite like that. Mine is more just inner workings of a bank. So when I got to the bank, after having Googled database marketing, I started to just bring on just some basics of, database marketing. We started looking at metrics and just dividing it up, doing a lot of power pivot table type stuff, just seeing what was there. And I realized we were sending out these newsletters to past customers that one of them was like a recipe card, and one of them was like springtime, spring forward. And I really hated them, but I was like, that's fine. I'm new here. We won't address that yet. And so later on, we did address it, and by this time I had 2 years of data saying, not only do I hate them, but all our customers hate them too. And so I went ahead and just shut them off. And as we'll talk about in the next section, I should have done a couple other things first. So I'll leave you hanging there. Yeah.
So my most recent fail was falling asleep at the pool with sunglasses on yesterday. I had a nice little tan this morning when I woke up. That was great. So with Vitamix, we often run activations through blogger relations. We have different brand partners. I don't know if anyone's heard of the company Green Blender, but they're a food service product that will actually send a blender box to your door, very similar to like a HelloFresh kind of a deal. And we have annual partnership tactics that we run with Green Blender. And last year we were running our spring tactic where if you bought one of our Recon machines, then we sent you a free initial starter kit for Green Blender. So what happened here is we had a dynamic field that populated a unique code for all of our Vitamix owners in our database. And we were using our agency partner at the time to help us set up the workflow. And we had delivered all the unique codes, everything was scheduled to go. We got to work and we saw these emails had already deployed, and we had maybe 7,000 unique codes deploy out to just a very small section of the list. 2 people actually went ahead and just bought the blender, and it was a huge nightmare, and I'll go through recovery later.
All right, so now our non-optimal experiences are out in the market. What have you guys done in terms of damage control, right? So it's out there, nothing really you can do about it except fight the fires. What did that look like for you guys? Who needed to be notified? How did you message internally within your organization about what just transpired? Cody, let's start with you. I know there's a cliffhanger, so we want to get everybody satiated.
Right. So I shut off the newsletters that were not performing and I just personally didn't like. And a year went by, and then one of our loan officers called me and said, hey, I'm looking in the CRM and I'm not seeing these newsletters going out. I was like, correct, right, thank you. And then I got a message invite from my boss and all the other mortgage managers and this particular loan officer. And I said, oh, I wonder what this is about. And I went to a meeting with my boss and his boss, and I just started getting rapid fire questions about what have you been doing with this email program. And so the mistake was, and I'll say the mistake and then I'll say why I made it. So the mistake was just not communicating effectively with team members, bosses, loan officers. So in the community bank, the loan officer owns the relationship. They take it very seriously. It's not a thing where marketing gets to do the best marketing. It's, what is the best for the team? What does the loan officer really care about? And I learned that lesson the hard way right then. And so that was really difficult because, you research, you want to do the best stuff, you really want to run a clean marketing program. During this time, we got our open rates to 45%, got deliverability, really high, unsubscribed, super low, but that was something I cared about and hadn't bothered to share with a lot of people.
So Jimmy, you have 7,000 codes out to a very small segment of your audience. What did that internally look like, and kind of how did you work through that?
Well, the first thing I did was fill my coffee, because you can't approach that without a good cup of coffee. I think in this situation, and something I learned early on in my career in email is that we're not saving lives, we're sending emails. At the end of the day, it's a mistake. But I was talking to somebody at the break just now, and Vitamix is very fortunate. In our owners database, they're raving fans. People who owns a Vitamix machine? Anyone in the room? Do y'all love it? Can I get an amen? All right. No, so everyone loves their Vitamix machine that has a Vitamix machine. There's people who say they can't live without it. It's changed their life. So we have people who genuinely believe that, and that's something that we try to promise as a brand. So thankfully, this was an owner's database. So I think right then and there, we could kind of simmer down our panic a little bit. But we're looking at a brand partnership with another huge company who's kind of relying on us to gain some traction. So I quickly regrouped with my boss. We got a team of people in a room and we said, okay, what's the game plan? How do we prioritize for the day? Who do we need in the room to resurrect the situation? So we got the creative director in there because we knew we were going to need some last-second email creative done. I got my agency on the phone. We got into our ESP at the time and we pulled that list and figured out how they were behaving in our analytics suite, because there were a few people who did convert and we needed to notify them that, hey, your purchase is actually now void, but here's what we can do for you. So we actually were coming up with custom one-to-one tactics for select users because people actually purchased and we wanted to make sure that they still were able to get what they want, but the correct way. So it took about 4 hours, but before noon, we had an entire recovery campaign out the door, and it was pretty great. And we also saw no unsubscribes because this group of people was so engaged with the brand, and they wanted to hear from us, and they were excited about this promotion. So we did not get one unsubscribe, which was a huge risk, I think, in this situation, but we were very fortunate.
Great. Dustin, how about you?
Yeah, so I don't think we had an actual process in place at that point. So what we started with, I kind of picked a two-prong. I had about 50 emails in my inbox from C-level down to anybody, right? Frontline people getting the actual calls within. So I spent my time on the communication path out to whoever needed to be informed with what we're going to be doing. I had a great team member that helped me get the oops email out, right? And ironically, of course, this happens at 4 p.m. on a Friday. So he stayed, till 10 p.m. to get this out, so he's a great team. But since then, though, we have put in, we kind of formed an escalations team so that we can figure out who needs to be informed, all the way from the call center front to the C-level to product to engineering, whoever needs to be involved. So we now have an escalations path for these type of incidents going forward.
That's a great point. I'll take another poll of the room. How many of you out there as brand marketers have a plan of action after a failure goes out or a non-optimal experience so that you know the steps to take place once that kind of S hits the fan, if you will? Raise your hands. Who has an action plan? Who needs to create an action plan? Yeah. I mean, all great pieces, because when, you know, the rubber hits the road, to Dustin's point, at 4 o'clock on a Friday, you need to know who to call, who to contact, who to kind of bring in to get a resolution to anything that you might need to touch and treat, you know, right away, immediately, because there are, you know, revenue impacts that come into play when you're talking about something that goes out from a failure standpoint. If you fail successfully, okay, you sent something out and it generated a whole bunch of sales, or you send something out and you give, you know, 50% off to folks who've already purchased and might not need that 50% off coupon. So there are real ramifications for these non-optimal events, and it's how you plan against that to really make that as smooth of an experience as we can. So let's talk about that a little bit more in terms of what we learned from these experiences and how we implemented that. Dustin, you talked about your process. Jimmy, have you changed anything at all in terms of how you operate with partners or with your campaigns? Talk to us a little bit about that.
Absolutely. I think, especially when working with partners, and we're running a couple campaigns with partners now, it's really understanding from the get-go how they expect this process to work, what KPIs are they putting in place that are going to measure this campaign, and then if something was to go wrong, we need to identify what's business critical. And I think those priorities and setting those out at the beginning of the campaign is something that's become something that we've done on a recurring basis now, because knowing your priorities up front, if it's a spelling error, or, I mean, everyone in this room has probably sent out a spelling error, but do we send an oops email for that? Probably not. You know, so is it a business critical error? Is it damaging to our brand partner? Is it damaging to us as a brand? Do we need to fix it? Yes, no, maybe. That's something that we look at the front of the project, sure. I think.
So Cody, you talked about your loan officers having, you know, as a stakeholder in terms of the emails that you send out. That's a good point as well. While we might send out something or stop sending something that we think is a benefit to our organization, it might have impacts to others. So how, in looking back on that or looking forward, when you're making those types of decisions, how do you figure out who the stakeholders are, how to address those, and kind of what the impacts may be that are outside of the marketing practice?
Sure. So for a long time, I operated on the familiar axiom, you know, let's do things now, we'll apologize later, right? And I learned that works for internal things. You know, you initiate projects, go around a few people that might be above you, that kind of thing. But anytime it impacts the loan officer or the customer, just do things above board, be totally honest, really present your data, and really, I got into marketing, so I wanted out of sales, but really just, if you really believe in something, just sell it as hard as you can and get a clear answer. So with the newsletter stuff, we brought back those things I didn't like, but we didn't automate them. So I automate everything else. Those are available for the people that want to go in and send them themselves. So we found a nice solution there. And really it's just about optimization, which we talk about, but it's suboptimal to have one part of your thing work perfectly if it doesn't really fit with the rest of the organization. That's my big takeaway.
Dustin, how are you? Any big learnings from your experience?
Yeah, one thing we did too, beyond just the regular touch points you'd expect, we have a very big social engagement. So as you can imagine, when something like this happens, that can stir that social channel. And so what's nice is she happens to sit next to me, so we were able to get that thing done right away. But our social channel ends up being such a positive thing for us, even though that's the first place people go to complain. And so it's been really nice to be able to do these things. It's funny, these oops things, for us, a lot of times will turn into positives, honestly. Just our member base is so loyal. They get a good laugh out of them all, honestly. And then even on the prospect side, it ends up our our funnel actually starts moving again. So even though it was a bad brand engagement, it was not a good experience, it still did actually help us in the end, ironically.
Great. So want to talk a little bit about QA process now, right? We all probably have some type of stated QA process. How do you guys now look at your QA processes looking forward to resolve any of these potential issues from popping up again? Is it human checks? Are there technologies out there, maybe vendors that you work with, either ESP or otherwise, that help you in that QA process? Talk to us a little bit about the processes that you undertake to go and vet your campaigns. Anyone can
I'll
jump
take
in.
this one first. So I mentioned earlier that we have 8 different global markets that we communicate to directly, along with a household and commercial, domestic, and international business. So it's a lot of people that we're dealing with. So one email campaign might affect an entirely separate group than another. So I think at the beginning of a campaign, it's really identifying who those functional leads are and who the key stakeholders within that campaign are going to be. Because if you get down to crisis mode, it's that group of people that should be 100% informed on that tactic. And like you were mentioning, the whole cross-functional, channel thing is huge in our world. I'm sitting on a 15-person digital team that manages this whole global strategy. So oftentimes, if there's an email crisis, I have to get social involved, or I have to activate our web team in some way, because the experience doesn't just begin and die with email. So really having that key stakeholder group per market has been really key for us. So if it's a UK tactic, I have a set group of 10 people who know they're going to be receiving a stakeholder test 3 days before that campaign goes out. Our creative team looks at every single email before it goes out, at least 4 days before, and that's just something that we've done to continually gut check for spelling, the UX of the whole thing. Are the links working? And it's been pretty successful. So,
Cody, anything on your side?
Yeah, so to avoid those problems, the first thing I did was created a permanent marketing committee. So now instead of I have an idea, let's go execute it, I kind of just lead sessions and figure out how we can use data and really bring about personalized and better marketing messages than it's springtime. But they add value to the loan officer, and the loan officer is comfortable with it. And we hash out a lot of those issues in the room first. And then as far as QA, that's a great thing about a bank. Between legal, compliance, the bank copywriter, I've got 8 or 9 really strong proofreaders. So not a lot of mistakes going out.
That's great. Dustin, how about you?
Yeah, we use the same QC process for any channel or even data. So we start up, from the data side, whether it's the target audience, there's a QC process. With that check and balances, we make sure whoever is creating the campaign, or whether it's the data that, like I said, the creative, whatever it is, it's somebody else. With creative, we have to have creative buy-off, again, it doesn't matter what channel, as well as compliance being in the financial world. So there's a bunch of, we'll never have a misspelling or stuff like that. It's more of that scenario like I described before, is where things can break. Because compliance, again, doesn't audit the target audience, right? So we have it for every single channel. We just use a basic Google form. It's pretty robust for each one of these steps. But what I like about it is it's logged within, Google Sheets afterwards. So honestly, every time we have used that form, we haven't had an issue. It's when we have these emergencies or someone works outside the process.
So again, back out to the audience. How many, again, marketers out there are one-man bands, meaning you set up the campaigns, you're uploading creative, you're hitting the send button, you're doing reporting. Show of hands, who's doing that out in the audience? All right, great. So for that segment of the audience, what do you guys, some advice for those folks out there in terms of if they're setting up creative, they're responsible for the QA, they're in it. Sometimes when we're doing everything from start to finish, we get blinders on and we see stuff that, there's stuff there that shouldn't be there, but we don't see it because we know exactly what it should be. Any tips for the audience in terms of what they can do in that QA process to help alleviate or eliminate any of these errors from actually going out? Again, anybody can jump in.
Yeah, so I guess I'll start again. I think it's all about educating people. I think somebody said that in the last panel as well. Educating your team. So if you are a one-man band, show people what it is that they need to be looking for in the email. Because oftentimes, you know, I'm sure a lot of you have seen this, you send out a creative test or a stakeholder test, and someone's like, oh, it looks great. Did the links work? Is everything spelled right? Is there even a pre-header text there? I mean, there's like things that I'll like leave out on purpose just to see if people notice it, because I don't think everyone really knows what to look for unless you're living and breathing email. So coming up with that checklist for your team, if you are a one-man band, and really educating people on, here's the stuff to look for, here's why you're looking for it, and here's why it's important, so that they look through it not just from a business lens, but through just like an overall functionality lens, I think is pretty important.
Great. Anybody else?
Yeah, if you're in that smaller situation, communicate clearly, often, repeat yourself as much as you need to, because people won't really care about marketing until they're confronted with it, and then they'll think they're better than you at it. And so have everything clear and be transparent up front, and don't be afraid to sell. And I'm going to borrow that roadshow idea from earlier, because that's a really good one.
Great. So I saw Steve get up. I have a few more questions for the panel, but before I do that, I want to kick it out to the audience. Does anybody have a non-optimal experience to share that they'd love to throw by the team? You're going to start with Della, really?
Well, brace yourselves. We're going to start with Della.
Let's try to draw him out.
Be gentle.
Come on, fair.
Hi, it's Della from AlchemyWorks. So one of the things that I own up, the biggest mistake I've ever had to watch an email marketing department swallow came from an automation that didn't go out. It was a 90-day price rise. The legal requirement was you had to notify 90 days before. Trigger was set up. It just didn't actually start happening for the best part of 90 days. So the email team was blamed for a loss of revenue of 90 days times price rise times 1 million customers or something ridiculous. And it was incredibly painful for them to live with. And it just seems to me that how do you guys deal with the fact that such a high proportion of all your campaigns now are automated? You know, that idea that oh, we just sent something out and it should have been red, it was blue. I don't think those mistakes happen very often anymore because of the QA stuff that you're talking about. How do you deal with the fact that there's maybe 300 campaigns that you don't actually know are happening?
Great question. I'll throw it to the panel first.
Yeah, I can jump in. That's a great scenario. In fact, we're going through an audit process right now. I think it's regular audits of those campaigns, especially from a content side. And you think from the banking world, the LIBOR rate changes all the time. LIBOR's in all your single footers. Everything's always changing, right? The savings calculations, whatever it needs to be. So we don't have it in place. We audit just once in a while. So we're going to get a regular audit in place, both with compliance and with us internally. But from the automation standpoint, what we're going to move towards as well is having a staging environment. So when we set up a new trigger like that, we can actually do it in staging before we roll it to production.
Similar. We are required to do weekly audits of our system, thanks to our lovely legal department. But that's made us be very disciplined, and we catch things like that very, very early. So it's time consuming, and it's fun to complain about legal, but it's actually been pretty good.
Jimmy, anything to add?
Yeah, so we're looking at all of our automations as how can we make this messaging evergreen instead of something that we need to continually version. So we actually do use movable ink, so thank you for the presentation earlier, but we do use movable ink, and we're working on a couple integrations with them down the road so that we can have continually dynamic content in our automated emails. And then I think it's just understanding how to report on these things. So if something is going wrong, educating yourself up front on how to recognize the issue is taking place so that you can stop that workflow and get your team together to fix it. Because I think that's a fault of myself and maybe probably more people in this room than want to admit it, but you don't always think to go back and look at something that's automated because it's just running, the money's coming in. But at the end of the day, it's like, oh, half the database isn't getting this or whatever it might be. So yeah, just continually going back and understanding what your report should look like. If numbers are coming in low, pull the red flag up if the system's not doing it for you. So.
Yeah. No, just to add, I think identifying your process and single points of failure within that process, putting monitoring against those single points of failure will allow you to help identify when a potential issue came up. So if a file wasn't processed or a seed wasn't deployed, having those alerts and notifications and making friends with your IT, your legal departments, because they have those alert mechanisms available that they can implement against your processes. So identifying those points, putting monitoring and notifications against those, they won't solve everything, but it'll get you a lot of the way there. Yep, go for it.
Hi. Yeah, my name is Kate Creamer. I work with Make Music. We make 2 different kinds of music software, one of which is music notation, the other of which is music education. Very different audiences for both of them. There's some crossover between the two, but very little. One of my first and biggest email marketing fails, I was brand new to email marketing, just joined my company. No one at my company knew how to use our ESP or had ever been involved in email marketing, so I was flying by the seat of my pants. Terrified constantly. And probably 2-3 months on, I was setting up my very first suppression test. I think this is a good highlight to like, you should have a test environment. But I was setting up my first suppression test for a smart music email about how we had just been approved as a textbook in Texas. And it looked like it was from one of our specific salespeople, Alan. And so I'm setting up this suppression test, subject line suppression test, because it's only going out internally. Why would I name it anything else? Lesson learned. And I sent that suppression test out to 500,000 Finale users. And was met with the response of like, I don't even know what this is not relevant, please stop emailing me, I hate you. Alan was furious, obviously doesn't understand email marketing, but everybody's responding to his signature in the email. But I think that highlights the importance of having a process when things fail. Fortunately, it turned into a good experience for us because we had that oops email, hey, we're really sorry, we're passionate about this, we're excited about this. But my favorite part about the whole scenario was that I actually our notation manager got a text from his son that literally just said, ... I see the suppression test was unsuccessful. So, thank you guys.
Great story, yeah. I think we've all been in that seat as well, so it's a very common non-optimal experience. Anybody else?
Yep, one more
All right.
back here.
Awesome. Jose.
Hey, it's Jose from Merkel, and I have been blessed with running 2 very large email services groups. In the past, I've seen more than my fair share of issues, and I'm happy to tell the real war stories later. But on coming back on Kate's piece, the thing is we tend to focus a lot on creative QA, but not enough on segmentation is my observation. I'd like to see how people really handle that. That's where the biggest mistakes I've ever seen have happened, not in the creative, like a spelling error, who cares? But it's really segmentation where bad offers go out, or like Della said, go out to your renewing subscribers or something like that. Those are the big ones. How do you guys deal with those?
Go ahead, guys. Anybody jump in?
We actually are operating now in a staging environment as well as the production environment. So I know a lot happens in stage with our tech team prior to anything going out in our live environment. So that's one way we're doing that. From a personal standpoint, though, if I'm building a new workflow, trying to target a new group of people, I leverage our partners to kind of help me through that, to make sure what type of results am I supposed to, what numbers am I supposed to be seeing, what is this supposed to look like? I mean, I think it's just kind of education at that point, because there are so many new ways to target people. And like we were talking about earlier, get that more like one-to-one approach. Speak to somebody on an individual level. How do you do that? How do you understand that person? So if it is super targeted, I always try to run the workflow without an email delivery at the end first, just to see like, what kind of lists am I getting out of this? Is this tactic even worth it? And educating myself on the back end before it does go out the door.
Anybody else want to jump in?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of us having the right tools in place too, right? So a lot of it will have a lot of discrepancy data all over the different places with different data sources, right? But the use case for CDP, right? One of the things we're doing is implementing a new tool to help with this. And whenever we get stuff outside of our current process, I keep going back to that, as well as outside of our current systems where we can create our own targeted audiences, that is a big downfall for us. So, I mean, as an example of that is our loan servicing center. We send out a bunch of delinquency emails, right? If you haven't paid your thing, and how we can help you get back caught up. And so then that's not really in my marketing customer database right now, right? So those will be where potential oops could come from. And so going back to your question, that's a tough one. So literally, it's me going back and email 3 times. We triple checked this list when it comes from an outside type thing, not best practice. But for me, it's going to be centralizing even stuff outside of the marketing world, all the transactional stuff that's not real important from a promotional standpoint, into my same CDP, so that I can also then put the same QC processes in for segmentation and targeting for those as well.
Yeah, and just to add in, I think it's knowing your audience. I talked earlier about making best friends with your IT folks. You need key individuals in each one of those groups. Email's great because it works with creative, it works with sales, it works with IT, it works with database. We work with all, we're the hub of the hub and spoke within our marketing groups. But we need to have key people that we can go to and talk to. So make friends with your DBA or the data guys or gals within your organization, and work with them and really know your data, so that when you're sending out a campaign that's highly segmented, you can get a look at those counts, you can do a gut check on, does this feel right? Is this what's supposed to be going out? And you're not going to catch everything, but at least you'll have some type of sanity check before executing, to Jimmy's point, working the workflow through before actually sending the campaign out. Those will help. It's not going to solve everything, but it'll at least try to find issues before they go out.
Just to piggyback on that too, with the experience-based emails like the Green Blender where we're sending unique codes kind of a thing, I recommend, and something that we've done now, is creating and baking in the time to do a test with an internal group. So have people go through your purchase process online and see, are you getting the response you need to based on this transaction? Have something set up and a testing environment set up that is in a live format so you can test it before it goes out, because I think a lot of times we're all moving quicker than our feet can handle, and we can't just assume that it's going to run properly every time. So actually running it in a live environment, but with a test segment, I think is really important, and make sure you get that group together too during that process.
I wanted to draft off of a good point that Dustin made about that an error can become a positive. That it actually can have a net positive effect in the end, in the matter of how you deal with it and how you then communicate with customers afterwards, since to err is human, and that often gives the company the opportunity to start acting human. And across a lot of channels. I want to go back, Dustin, and ask you about how you handled it and how the social channels work to make it a positive. Anyone else on the panel? But I wanted to start with all of you. Are there examples where that you can cite where you turned errors into net positives in the way you followed up?
Arthur with eData Source. In a prior life, we were chasing the Dell account. May you all work on Dell at some point. A great account, but 17 trips to Austin. But my point of sharing the story was that we were in the finals, and they knew that we worked for Rulala, and on a Tuesday, Rulala sends out, oops, we made a mistake. So all of a sudden, Dell's all over me saying, you're good, but you made, and I said, no, you don't understand. They made that up. There was no mistake. They mail on a daily basis. And so it was a way to goose the numbers, and you could see they actually got a slightly better open rate associated with that. So there is a net part of it was to the early, don't take this too seriously. We are sending email, which is the end of my story, which is we got the Dell business. It's Halloween. We're deploying to 16 million, and the subject line is boo. And I'm like, shit. Because I'm assuming somebody in the production department thought it'd be funny. Turns out Dell has a sense of humor.
Go here.
Hi guys, I'm Taz from Barkbox. We have the unique advantage of being a dog company, so our audience is automatically really engaged with lighthearted and edgy content. So one of our biggest oops moments was when we did a really heartfelt email for Thanksgiving, like thanking them for being a supporter of ours, shopping with us. And a bunch of emails went out with "Hey guest" because they had checked out as guest, which was horrible. But we actually ended up sending out an email right after saying, "Hey, so this doesn't happen again. Give us your name," in a really funny way, which worked out great because people actually got the humor and they assumed that was a part of like trying to get their info, which was really cool. But yeah.
That's great.
Did you have something?
Yeah, go ahead.
Hi, I'm Stefan from Frazee, and last year we were working with one of the world's biggest retailers. A really simple spelling mistake in a subject line that they had written actually was meant to go out to about 10 million people and say, decorate your home at Christmas, and they didn't put the M in the home, and actually sent out an email that said, decorate your home this Christmas. So everybody started to really panic about it, thinking it was a real problem. That email campaign actually got the highest open rate they had over the Christmas period. And the moral of the story is, yeah, don't underestimate your audience. You know, people have a sense of humor. If they're engaged with the brand, if you've done a good job all year round, they will forgive the odd mistake. So just don't panic.
That was actually featured in a Litmus article
Yes.
like 2 weeks ago. I just read about that.
We're now
And
going
I
to
laughed then, and I'm laughing now.
We're now instructing email marketers to make mistakes.
Mistakes are great.
I think Ryan from Adestra. My biggest, like Jose, I've seen so many errors over the years. It's funny and sad at the same time. Our biggest one was back a few years after Can Spam came out. I was working on the brand side, and my marketing manager comes to me in the morning, and she has this pale look on her face, and she says, "I've made a mistake." And I'm like, "Oh, what could have happened?" She says, "Well, when I filled out the data form for the CRM team, I checked all the boxes except I forgot to check the box to exclude our opt-outs." And I said, "Oh, did we send them to him?" And she says, "Yes, we sent 6 million unsubscribes." And the campaign, she's like, "What do you want to do?" I said, "Nothing, shush." We got the highest sales for the month in that campaign, and nobody complained about it, but we all sat around and stressed out. So the moral of the story was we printed off the forms that they had to fill out, and we permanently checked the suppression box.
Anybody else have any good stories?
I'll just say real quick, one of the activities this afternoon will be decorating hose, so just so you guys know, just letting you know. Who had the other one? Here, back here. I'm just the messenger, okay?
So for one company I used to work with, we set up a very complicated welcome stream. Very complicated, too complicated, frankly. And it didn't go live for about 3 weeks, like it was dead. It was not working. And so that was a huge disaster for us. But what we did is we went into the data because these people had kind of gone through a path. So we were able to understand the impact of the welcome program on revenue. Because in the absence of that program, we could actually see its value. So, we turned that one into a little positive. So.
Yeah, the only other thing I would add is people have short memories, right? So if you have a subject line issue or you have an image issue, smaller issues like that, likelihood is next day they're going to get another email from you, they're going to open, they're going to engage. If they're loyal engagers, they're going to interact with your program. They know everybody's human, mistakes are made, so it's best to learn from the experience and kind of keep going.
And we're going to do a roundtable at the end of the morning that extends this, and you can share there. George, panel, thanks very much.